Okay.
In the driveway with.
You're front and center.
I'm thinking I
can.
God, that looks fun. Yesterday between the rain.
If you get touched off, it's up. Second shot. No, just put it down. Yes, we went.
Oh, I got that letter.
It's fine.
I didn't know what it was. Pretty good. I just got off the picture. Yeah. Well, I've had my inoculation. I'm not one of these treatment people. That's quite right. Are you going to take Good to see you.
You've been in the sun somewhere, haven't you?
Yeah, can you tell?
Yes, a little bit.
We waited 2 years for that because, you know, last year with COVID, we couldn't go anywhere or do anything. My wife took
You've been relegated to the gallery.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah, it was a family thing. It was really good.
Not a bad place.
Played a lot of cards.
Where did you go?
I went to St. Martin, St. Kitts, went to Puerto Rico and Grand Turk.
Really?
And I'll tell you what, I want to talk about it. There's a couple of real good stories. It's beautiful. You'll love that. I mean, you'll enjoy it.
Hope catch you. I'm assuming you'll be loud enough. Hell, you're kind of like me. Or maybe even Friday. At least I think you're going to make it out Friday. Well, since I'm in the city.
Yes, yes.
We'll catch up then.
Okay.
Keep an eye on that.
Well, this is the man that comes to for weeks. Somebody decided our mud was going to be
Johnny.
You guys.
You want one?
Yeah, you what?
She brown.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun. It's what? weather.
We got one right there. David.
Yeah, we've been down a lot. I wear a mask. Still in the fair.
Oh, yeah.
I hate it.
That's just bad. I don't know what it's going to be.
I got to wear it. Got whole side of me. And I got hair. All kinds of things.
No, I meant the bench. I never did work on, but I worked 30-something years ago. Yeah, that's bad stuff.
I'll call this special board meeting of Shelby County Board to order. Everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
roll call.
Kenny Barr.
Here.
Barbara Bennett. Mark Bennett.
Here.
Teresa Bain. Here. Brian Hoffman.
Present.
Cassie Cox. Here. Dennis Durnovich.
Here.
Jesse Durbin.
Here.
Julie Edwards. Here. Gary Gergany.
Here.
Rod Height.
Here.
Matt Kessler. Larry Lenz. Sharon Ongman. Here. Bobby Orman.
Here.
Gary Patterson.
Here.
Derek Piercy.
Here.
Robert Simpson.
Here.
Jeff Slifer.
Here.
David Switz.
Here.
Don Tate. Lynn Williams.
Here.
We have quorum. Public body comment. Any public body comment?
I guess I have a question. Why is prayer being omitted?
We don't do a prayer, I guess, in a special board meeting. That's the only thing I can come up with. Yes.
Just a question, are there any extra reports that the public might be able to have to review while you guys discuss it?
Not at this time. Any other questions? Any other public body comment? Yes.
No matter what comes out of this, even if there's one thing, as a public person, I guess I'd say I would love for you guys to make a remediation plan with at least, what you're going to do and present it to all of us, even if there's one thing that needs to be fixed. If there's 0 things that need to be fixed, I understand, but if there's one, it'd be nice for you guys to come up with a plan and kind of be able to go through that each board meeting to know where you're at in each one of those things. Thank you.
Any other public body? Yes, ma'am.
Marcia White, another public person. I'd like to see us do legal this time.
Any other public body comment? Any other public body comment? All right, seeing none, we're going to open the floor to Mr. Vanderberg to present the audit.
I'd like to stand as I talk to you guys. If you find that's insufficient, then I will speak into the microphone. So thank you for having the opportunity for me to explain this to you as well as provide your report. So I want to kind of start by talking about payroll in its simplest form is taking the hours worked by somebody, multiplying it times the rate of pay, coming up with some deductions that come out of that, and then paying them the net amount. To be honest, every component of that has been wrong at some level within the audit period that we looked at. We have hours that were inappropriately documented or questionably worked. We have rates of pay that are inconsistent with the contract. We have deductions that were not consistent with the contract. We have a number of errors in every single component that comprises payroll. So we looked at the period from 2015 through July of 2020. And during that time, we were looking for things that are indicators of fraud. So I realize that you may think that I should be able to say, this is a fraud and this is who did it. And we're not given that opportunity. What we have the opportunity to do is say, these are indicators of fraud, and whether they exist or not is determined by a trier of fact, a judicial process. So we identify errors, we identify issues, and at that point that is determined by somebody that has judicial authority, not by us. So what I've got for you is I've got a report, and I'm glad to interact with you about this if you'd like. What I'd like to do is kind of give you a high-level review of what we did, what we came up with, what the net results are, and hit some of the topics that we talked about. Like I said, I'm glad to interact with you about it, but I realize this is a lot for you to process if you're going to listen to me while I'm here as well. So my goal would be that you would listen to what I have to say, that you review this audit at your leisure, and then I'll be glad to come back and talk to you about the problems specifically that we came across, or potential fixes or things that you could do to not be quite as vulnerable to problems. So the thing that I realize you all, let's get this out of the way in the beginning. The net value of the problems we encountered was $759,379. So I don't want that to get lost on you as we talk about the rest of this. In one department, for 5.5, 6 years, there was $750,000 worth of problem. There are more than that, but one of the things that I would say is, around our office, we've had a couple sayings about Shelby County, and right now one of the big ones was woefully inadequate. And that would identify the records that you've kept, the procedures that you have, that those things have to improve. When we talk about things that have to improve as a remediation plan, well, you guys got to improve your records. They're bad. So the $759,000 is the total error we came up with. You are fortunate in the fact that when we looked at the errors in favor of the employees, we looked at the errors in favor of the county, what we find is that at the end of the day, you actually have an underpayment to your employees when grouped as a whole of $6,283. So there's this, in the next page of the report that has the spreadsheet on it, we'll kind of identify some of the key areas. But the thing is, you have basically underpaid collectively the employees, whether it be deputies or other staff. There is money that I believe would be due to them. The other component to this is you pay taxes and payments to different retirement plans, etc., as an employer. And as such, the net effect to different taxing bodies and people that collect monies from you, the net effect was $67,000. So the county paid $67,000 more in taxes and retirement and other things than what they should have. So the next page kind of talks about what kind of comprises this. So I want to talk about the components that really make up the heart of what it is we're talking about. So whenever this all started, I know you guys were very focused on the fact that the key issue was the deputy schedules working 410s instead of 5/8s. And there's no doubt that's a key issue. That's going to be $276,000 worth of the error. One of the components that I don't think was really considered at the time is the fact that your contract states that anytime an employee works over 8 hours in a day, it is considered overtime. So that's something your contract states, and when people work 10 hours a day, that is 8 hours at straight time and 2 hours at time and a half. But they weren't paid time and a half, they were paid straight time. So that is kind of an offsetting issue, and that is $228,000. So those are the heavy hitters of this, and I know everybody has been expecting that those were the predominant issues. Well, only one of those was really probably expected to be the predominant issue. But there are other items on here that come up with that, and I'll let you digest that at your leisure. But I want to talk about the key things that I wanted to bring up as findings. So your sheriff's department has a collective bargaining agreement, and that collective bargaining agreement is a contract between the county and the employees. And it very clearly sets out the expectations of here's what we as the employer are going to do, and here's what we expect from you as the employee. And I am not convinced anybody here, and I don't mean this to be offensive, but I'm not convinced anybody read this contract, because the number of errors that exist between the real world and that collective bargaining agreement is mind-boggling. It surprised me. It shocked me. As I was kind of thinking about this, I wanted to say, I've been a CPA for almost 3 decades. And in that period of time, I've not found a collective set of problems that are even close to what I would say the collective set of problems here are. Now, you may not know that you're that far off of center of where you should be, but you are far off of center for what you should be in terms of policies, procedures, reading the contract, complying with the contract. There is no question that there has been very little effort to coordinate with that. Why have it if you have no desire to cooperate with it? That creates risk for everybody. So one of the first findings I want to talk about is vertical movement. So your contract specifies that there are going to be 2 sets of movements in pay every year. One of them will be a vertical movement on their anniversary date, and the other is a horizontal movement at the September 1st, basically the renewal of the contract. For nearly every single person within the contract, that was not done. That has an opportunity to deprive your employees of a higher rate of pay for part of the year. If a person had an anniversary in January, they would have stepped down on the payroll schedule, but they didn't get that until September. So the vertical movement was a problem. The second one, so this was a significant issue to me. The second one we have here is the contract date. So within the contract that covers the period basically for almost the entire audit period, there is a provision in here that says, so under pay, this is on page 18 of the CBA. On page 18 of the CBA, it says, existing employees shall be placed on, now keep in mind, context, this is for pay from 2015 through 2018, which your new contract didn't really exist until the end of 20, so this is effectively almost the entire period. It says, existing employees shall be placed on the scale in the step equal to their years of service as of September 1st, 2011. So a simple typo of nobody changing a date says that people in 2015 are going to be paid based on their years of service as of 2011. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Now, everybody signed the contract, so I have to believe that's what they intended to do, but it proves to me that this was not very thoroughly reviewed. To speak to that point again, I guess I would say, in the 2011 to 2015 contract, I thought it was interesting that when speaking of health insurance, it refers to, it talks about, this is on page 18 of the prior contract, refers to the amount that's going to come out per pay period for 2008 and 2009. This was 2011 to 2015. So it wasn't fixed in the 2010-11 and in the 11 to 15, 14. You guys got to read this stuff. I don't care who you designate to read it, but somebody's got to read these contracts. These are simple things to review and say, hey, this doesn't look right. Is this what we intended to say? So keep in mind, this issue of having the wrong date of 2011 in the contract, that has caused every single employee within any of the bargaining units to be paid at a rate of pay inconsistent with your contract. Okay? You have a contract and a wage schedule that talks about years of service and where you're going to be paid based on those years of service, but now they're off by 4 years. So every single person was paid at a rate inconsistent with what you said they were going to be paid. Now, did you intend for that to be different? I couldn't tell you. But it was signed and filed and never an objection filed to it. So I think that's problematic. We saw things where the contract specifies that employees, this specifically was referring to people that are in the jail matron, cook, janitor, and secretary bookkeeper, will be hired at a pay of $24,000 a year. But they were never paid $24,000 a year. You would consistently see $12 an hour, but there's not 2,000 work hours in a year, it's 2,080 work hours in a year. If you pay them $24,000 a year for 2,080 hours, that's like $11.53 an hour. But you weren't paying them $11.53, you were paying them $12. Once again, this is really simple stuff to follow up on that's just never been policed. It's just never been watched. The method of turning in the payroll to the treasurer, I thought that was really interesting. You guys would turn in payroll on a Monday, for payroll on a Friday, for hours worked through a Saturday. Now, how can you possibly have an accurate payroll? Now, keep in mind, we had an audit period this broad, and so some of these things changed. But who in their right mind could keep track of overtime that you have yet to work in a week that you've not worked, or sick time, or vacation time, or personal day? How could you possibly do that? It would be impossible. Now, I understand that's been remedied since then, which, congratulations, that is a step in the right direction. So once again, the meaty issue here is the 410s versus the 5/8s. So you all are aware of what I'm speaking of for that. By the employees working 4 10-hour days on and 4 10-hour days off, or excuse me, 4 10-hour days and then being off 4 days, and then doing that kind of rotation, that caused there to be an inconsistency between the hours that were expected to be worked and the hours that were paid. That difference would vary depending on the schedule, but it would be between 200 and 300 hours per person per year on the deputy schedule that they did not work the hours that you would have expected. Now that can change based on vacation and different fringe benefit times, but that's a significant issue that you need to be aware of. You can't just go in and make a wholesale change to work schedules without looking at the contract that's intended to govern these. And once again, we alluded to the other big issue is when they worked these 10-hour days, they had 2 hours of overtime that they were not paid for. They were paid straight time instead of overtime. Now, if we want to talk about how to complicate that matter, anybody that was hired after January 1st of 2011 in the Sheriff's Department is considered Tier 2 for SLEP. That's their retirement. And so anybody that is in SLEP Tier 2 does not get to credit their compensation that is overtime. So you all have given 4 10 hours a day saying it is regular time when it's really not 4 10-hour days. It is 4 8-hour days, 32, plus 8 hours of overtime. You all have paid, you've taken money out of their pay for SLEP, you have paid money for SLEP on compensation that is not intended to be covered by SLEP. And the amount of the SLEP, so the portion of the SLEP that was taken from employee pay, $16,424. The amount that was overpaid by the county on that, $26,279. Now those, maybe you all are satisfied that those aren't meaningful numbers, but I assure you to IMRF, they would be interested in those numbers. Their actuaries would probably lose their mind if they knew that pay was incorrectly reported by those amounts. Another thing in the contract we saw, health insurance. So your contract clearly says health insurance will be $40 withheld from every pay, but you really didn't do that. You did $40 from 24 pays a year. You pay every other week, that's 26 pays, you only took it out 24. So that amounted to, the report says that, I don't need to go over that specifically. Personal days, we saw that your contract clearly says personal days are intended to be 3 days. The contract says a day is 8 hours. 3 8-hour days is 24 hours. The deputies working 10-hour shifts, we're taking 3 10-hour days off. That's 30 hours instead of 24. So that is a meaningful difference. Dental insurance. Dental insurance did not come out pre-tax for part of the period that we looked at. That has a result of having people, you guys pay Social Security Medicare on monies that were not considered pre-tax, they should have been. And that also then will be causing all of the employees that had dental insurance to have an incorrect W-2, will have caused them to pay taxes on money that they didn't need to. The W-2s for all of those people would technically be wrong. Once again, just another thing that happened. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not really going to pull any punches here, but I'm going to say, in our office we found it very interesting. We even came up with a name for this. This is what we're referring to as the additional comp time credited. And this may be inappropriate, but we called it the Shelby County Special. Quite honestly, what you guys decided to do was you said, hey, we're going to give people 40 hours of comp time, and they're going to get to use it and get it paid out whenever they want. And that's a pretty important issue to me. During the years 2015 through 2018, there were 9 employees that were documented as having received a total of 1,000 hours of comp time above and beyond what the contract allows. The net consequence of that would be about $25,000. So there is $25,000 that the county gave away, so to speak, in extra time above and beyond time that people were compensated for anyway. I don't know how that was able to continue on. You had rules about how much comp time could be accumulated. That was disregarded. You had people that were, your vacation was consistently granted on January 1st, and the people would use it as they needed to. This would create a vacation deficit, which is not allowed. You had employees that would work a holiday and they would earn 12 hours of comp time instead of 15. If they worked a holiday, they would be paid for 12 instead of 15. Your contract says on a holiday you get time and a half. If they weren't getting time and a half on what they worked, they were getting time and a half on 8 hours. So I don't know where that would come in. Your sick time was incorrectly allocated. We had 84 instances where 7 employees were granted sick time that resulted in a deficit balance. Your contract specifically says you cannot take sick time unless you've earned it. It's clear as can be, but yet it happened regularly. 2016, I found it interesting that in 2016, 41% of all deputy overtime for the entire year was turned in on a singular payroll date. That payroll date happened to be the first payroll of the new contract amounts for the new contract year. So every September 1st, every employee gets an adjustment to their pay. It just so happens that on the first September 1st of the year, of that new contract year, you get a larger one because you get the contract adjustment, plus you get the September 1st adjustment. In 2016, 41% of all overtime for the entire year was turned in on that one date. As an example, we picked one employee had 19 hours of overtime for the September 9th payroll and only had 21 and a half hours for the entire year. So you need to tighten up those controls. It is not statistically possible to have all of the 41% of your entire year's overtime on a payroll that is at a larger amount. It's not realistic to believe that. If it was 9/11/01, maybe you would understand that. There was nothing within the reports that made us believe that there was something that caused there to be some dramatic amount of overtime during that period. Overtime not paid at time and a half. So we noticed 123 instances where employees were paid for over 80 hours on a paycheck, and it was paid at straight time. This is simple stuff. You don't get the ability to pay a person more than 80 hours on a paycheck at straight time. That's federal rule. In your case, 2 weeks, 80 hours. You don't get the ability to pay them at straight time. That is time and a half, period. Very simple. There were 123 instances where that happened. In this instance, we would say that was about 10 grand worth of pay that people missed. And I realize that there would be some people that would say, well, it really wasn't that much, because we grossed up their hours to take into account their time and a half. And I'd say, you don't have the records to prove it, so that's not true. There was one employee paid for 126 and a half hours in a paycheck at $12 an hour for every one of them. You can't do that. You can't do that. I'm not going to go through all of the, then also employees not enrolled in IMRF. That's a pretty simple thing. When a person works 1,000 hours, or when you're expecting them to work 1,000 hours, you enroll them in IMRF. It's as simple as it gets. Regularly, in the initial stages of the audit years, we found there were 6 instances where employees should have had IMRF with health and pay, and the county contributing their portion, and it just didn't happen. I don't have an excuse for why it was just not done. So, I want to implore you to think of these findings that we've come up with. I mean, we've looked through tens of thousands of pages of documentation and details and calculations and bank statements. You have a sizable problem, and you need to address it. In one department within a reasonably sized county, you had almost $750,000 worth of error. You're fortunate that they offset each other to a significant extent. That could have, you could have just as easily not had them offset each other, and you would have dramatic problems to deal with. I want to make sure that you're aware. I obviously don't get to make any commentary on civil or criminal penalties associated with what's going on, but there are a lot of state and federal agencies that may demand some fixes here, and those could amount to a lot of money. You need to be mindful of the fact that you don't have a viable defense for these things, in my opinion. From an accounting perspective, from a reasonable business perspective, you don't have records to support the positions that you have that we've identified, and I don't know that you could prevail. So, like I said, there is a lot of information in this report. My initial expectation was to make this something entirely different, but it would have been in the hundreds of pages, and you all wouldn't have read that much. So I tried to make it something that hopefully you would read, because I want you to take this serious. And then I want you to be able to kind of process it, and then I'm willing to come back and talk to you about recommendations, suggestions, improvements, those kinds of things, if you have that desire. I know that you probably initially want me to come in and be able to say, this person committed fraud, and we just don't get to do that. That's not the way it works. We get to identify problems. It is for a trier of fact to decide if those problems are fraudulent, intentional, or if they are just an accumulation of errors.
Anybody on the board have any questions for John?
I do. Does anybody that was on the board at the time period through this audit have any defense of why this happened? Or any, like what allowed this much error to take place?
I don't know if the board would have had any kind of say-so on most of this stuff. This just would have went through payroll. I mean, I'm not going to pass any kind of blame, but I'm just saying.
I'm asking, did the board approve the contracts? Do we?
Yes.
And then who's responsible for making sure that the contracts are upheld during the contract? Do we have a committee that meets with the sheriff's department that reviews to make sure that kind of does an internal audit throughout the course of the contract to make sure that what we're doing, what we're saying we're doing is actually being done.
I don't mean the committees that do that type of thing, though, do we?
We're not auditors.
No, you're not auditors, but you're responsible for making sure that the taxpayers and the employees of the county are not being treated negligently. And this,
If you sit on that committee, whether it was.
I would gladly sit on that committee. I'll gladly sit on
You
it.
saw paperwork, would you know?
I would hope I would, or I shouldn't be sitting up here.
Everybody was testing on the records that they're giving you, but how do you know?
But
whether
we're
it
trying to
actually
make
worked?
this as a treasurer's problem, when obviously the problem happened before it got to the treasurer's office.
I'm not saying it didn't.
Yeah, but that's what we
When
need
you're
to
handed these
address.
papers, and you look at them, how do you know they worked them out?
That's why we do audits as things go.
That's
We
why
look
you
at
do
the
an audit every
timesheets,
year.
we say to, the committee says to the people. I mean, that's what I did. I work in healthcare, not law enforcement. But when we were audited by the state of Illinois, we had the year following our audit to ensure that we were living up to the expectations of the Department of Public Health. And what we did was, we looked at the contracts or the things that they pointed out to us that were being done incorrectly, and we made up a plan to make sure that that did not continue year after year after year, or even month after month. This board really ultimately answers to our county. We're responsible for our employees and our taxpayers. And we did them a great disservice in that period of 4 years. And, I mean, I don't know, an apology is owed to somebody.
Teresa?
Okay, go back to the 4 10-hour days. I take it that there's no paper trail with the union on those 4 10-hour days, that they were implemented and not negotiated.
There's been nothing that was filed to indicate so whenever you have a collective bargaining agreement, whenever you have a modification or a change to that, an amendment, you file a memorandum of understanding or something with the county clerk.
Yes.
And in this instance, nothing was ever filed. So we
Those 10-hour days affect more than just their pay, as you pointed out. It affects their vacation, because vacations are, unless specified, are set up on 8-hour days.
and they did them on 10-hour days. So I saw
That's a
Yep.
problem. And their sick time probably was set up on 8-hour days.
They took it in
And
10 hours.
they took it in 10 hours. So there's a lot of problems around that 4 10-hour days that it impacts more than what I realize, because I've worked with agreements and stuff, so I know a little bit. I've negotiated 10-hour days and stuff. But this impacted more than that. And this board sitting here was not a party that I understand to any kind of an agreement that allowed for the 4 10-hour days. It was implemented and agreed upon by the people who worked under it, is what it was done. And shame on a lot of people, because you cannot negotiate your own terms under a contract. The contract is written for a reason. So that's water under the bridge, I think. But it has impacted a lot of things here and stuff. And I hope going forward with the new MOU that we have and stuff, that things will be taken as they're written and followed by what is written and stuff. But what you have pointed out too is, this is not only in the sheriff's department, because those people sent timesheets in, but unless I'm wrong, they don't have anything to do with the IMRF payments or the taxes that were withheld or any of that kind of stuff. That isn't their department over there. So it's more than just the jail.
Gary?
You know, a lot of these things you brought up, we passed some time ago a new payroll. We've never enacted or enforced it as a board. I brought it up 3 different times and just get frowned at, and we go on to the next meeting. So a lot of those things you're saying we corrected may or may not have been corrected, because we've never enforced that new payroll policy.
Well, if I can, I don't mean to be facetious, but I'll say, you had a collective bargaining agreement that was a wonderful contract for what you should have been doing that a payroll policy really didn't, I'm not going to say the payroll policy wasn't needed, but I'm going to say you had a policy in terms of a contract that wasn't followed either. So I will add to that to say there is a lot of room for improvement. It would be hard not to improve on where you sit today.
Well, and a lot of the pay scale, or sheets, time sheets, nobody wants to fill them out, and they all battle that that's impossible. The sheriff's office can't keep time sheets. I don't know why, but pretty simple to put numbers on a piece of paper. So a lot of what goes into the treasurer is basically a number of pay this, and you have to pay it because we told you to. And you know, it's not surprising we're in the mess we're in. I've been here 10 years, and I brought up things, and it doesn't go anywhere. One question I have, too, with all of this, who is our legal counsel in this matter?
I'm not qualified to answer that.
No, I'm asking Chairman.
I would assume right now, we don't really have one unless the state's attorney is the one that's involved.
Why are we sitting here without an attorney?
The Attorney General has the case as far as a criminal investigation. As far as a civil case, I'm the counsel for it at this point.
But we need somebody that we can ask questions of. And we've not had real good luck getting the Attorney General's office to answer questions. It's kind of a waste of energy. Why can't there be somebody put in this situation? Because our state's attorney has stepped down, dismissed herself from this case. She shouldn't be doing anything with it because of her comments that she didn't feel like it would be fair for her to serve in that capacity. But I think as a board, we need some legal advice. And I think it's a shame that we've had nothing this whole time.
If you would like a special prosecutor appointed that isn't involved at all with the county, you can do that. As far as the criminal aspect went, I filed the motion with the court and the judge granted it because I'm in a position where I work with the sheriff's deputies. I can't go around prosecuting sheriff's deputies for crimes. Not that I believe any crime was committed, but a neutral agency needs to make that call, and the judge appointed the Attorney General to do that, and the Attorney General accepted it. As far as the civil issue goes, I'm in a similar position because I do represent the Sheriff's Department and the County Board. The board feels like it would like neutral advice from a different attorney. I would agree to appoint a special prosecutor or petition the court to do so.
Cassie?
So, as the newest mind here on this team, my question is for the board and for you, Chairman. Is it or is it not our responsibility here to be sort of the final accountability when it comes to what is happening within the county departments? Enforcing policy, ensuring contracts look the way that they should look, ensuring that the leadership within the departments are following the policy. Does that or does that not fall to us to ensure that that is happening?
Yes. And I believe it has improved immensely in the last 2 years. I think Sheriff McReynolds would agree with his department has improved in his record keeping and what he's doing. So we're done some of the fixes we need to do already. Correct? Sorry to put you on the point there, Sheriff, but...
Yeah, I don't know anything that was prior to my
Right.
time.
But you're doing the things the way they should be done now. Mark, you had something?
Yes. In your review of the timekeeping, did you find a lack of employees filling out timesheets versus maybe department heads, or did you find individual time cards?
I will say, I'm going to refer back to my original comment of woefully inadequate. I will say that we saw things inconsistent with what you would traditionally expect. We would see things that were 8 to 12, 1 to 5, 8 to 12, 1 to 5, 8 to 12, 1 to 5, or people that worked, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, with no additional documentation. It's not intended to be you writing down 8. It's intended to be I showed up at 7:54 and I worked until 11:58, and I worked then again. From a workman's comp perspective, you should demand that. From a payroll accuracy perspective, you should demand that. Yeah, it would be hard for me to defend much of any position on how the payroll hours and records were kept in any capacity.
Okay. On that same note, then, the redundancy of those hours, did you find where employees had, I'm going to say, put a whole year's in where it was 8 to 4, 8 to 4, every day of the whole year?
We would see that on the payroll side. The records are part of your natural record retention policy. And many of these, in relation to some of these periods, had been destroyed. I'm not going to say rightfully or wrongfully. It's not for me to judge that. But I will say, of the records we had, yes, we would see that there would be people that had 80 hours every single week of the entire year without exception. Yes. There were people that we would see had, consistent hours that would be unlikely to be that regularly exactly that. My intuition would be that some of those hours would be short and some of them would be long. There is inadequate record to tell which one it is.
So on the opposite, did you find any records that you thought someone had actually
That's worse.
No, that's my
done every day where they were where they had actually been very truthful?
It appears that there would be times when people had been truthful, but I will say it's inconsistent. As a whole, I could not say that there would be a reliable pattern.
The other one too.
Bobby? Yeah, could you,
Thank you.
on the vertical movement part,
yeah,
could you elaborate a little bit in that area? Because it seems, were they moving?
They were moving
up slowly or too quickly?
They were moving vertically and horizontally on September 1st. Okay, so your pay schedule looks like this. And every anniversary date, you should come down a year. And every September 1st, you should go over a year. And it happened for one employee in 1 year during 6 years that they moved vertically at their anniversary date and not at the September 1st date. So the reality is a person, if you look, for instance, on the deputy wages, if you would look at, let's take it from a person that started. Their starting salary is $19.28. One of the employees we looked at, actually, they were hired in January. At the next January, they should have gone from $19.28 to $21.63. But they didn't go down to $21.63 in January. Instead, they waited all the way until September. So you have 8 months of underpayment of, what is that, $2.40 an hour. This is everybody. Every employee across every wage matrix of the audit period.
So, in a roundabout way, the period of time that they were underpaid owed to the county on Section B.
I did not take into account the effect of the vertical move for every employee, for every payroll of the year of the 6 years, just because, once again, I would have been making a report that would have been, at some level, it would have been unworkable. It would have been so huge. But there is a problem in the fact that you have underpaid people that is not quantified in here by the difference between their anniversary date and September 1st for that one step vertically. Everybody.
Okay, all of this that we know we've done wrong, would you have a recommendation that this be worked through with that department and somebody come back and spot check the errors that you have found to see if they've been corrected?
I assure you those things should be corrected. And I believe that you could spot check these very easily and reasonably under some level of effort, yes. They absolutely should be.
Can't the committee, wouldn't that be a responsibility of the committee that meets over, that handles the sheriff's department?
We never see the payroll sheet.
But can't you ask to see them?
We see the payroll sheet. but
It's a different committee.
It's not the payroll sheet that you're going to see that's going to alert you to a problem.
No.
It's going to be taking the collective bargaining agreement, which everybody has, and asking for what a person makes through the treasurer's office, and then just comparing the two. It would be super simple.
So it's easy to do an internal audit rather than having to hire someone to audit what we could do ourselves.
There's no question you could, with appropriate procedures and knowledge of what you're looking for, almost all of this could be found with enough effort. I mean, we found it, but I would hope you don't put in as many hours as we did. But with the right, knowing what to look for, yes, you can fix those things. I'm probably as concerned about what you don't know to look for as what you do know to look for. Because these things happened for every bit of 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 before we really realized there was a problem. I don't know how much before that those problems existed, and I don't know what new problems can generate in the future. But your point of spot checking, absolutely right. Can I say this was done intentionally or accidentally? I can't say that. If it's done intentionally, you will want to find that out, and spot checking it will cause people to not do that intentionally, or not do it as much. So it is prudent to be doing that.
But I feel like if we did an internal audit, then that gives the board some accountability, and it forces us to know what's going on within our county departments. I mean, then we can't sit up here and say, well, I didn't know this was happening. We need to know what's happening.
Derek? So I have a question as far as like on paper how this is supposed to be in a wash, right? Like amount overpaid, amount underpaid.
I want to say one thing. I wouldn't call it a wash. I would call it you're very fortunate in one component of this. But yes, go ahead.
In one scenario, if I was just an employee and I was on part of this, I was overpaid $6,000, and part of it I was underpaid $6,000. I'm good, okay? And a different scenario, say I'm employee A, he's employee B, I'm underpaid $6,000, he's overpaid $6,000. On paper, it looks like this, but neither one of us are squared up here. So did that scenario occur to where it's not?
Oh, absolutely. There will be people that were underpaid and people that were overpaid. If you use a broad enough broom, you sweep them together and say, you're 6,000 to the O. There will certainly be people that would be in a deficit and people that are in an excess. But I want to clarify, I want to go back to this because I want to impress upon it. The greater fear that you should have as a board is what's yet to come. And that's going to be Department of Labor, Illinois Department of Labor, Social Security, IMRF. You should be fearful of any communication from them in the future because you have a level of vulnerability that is startling.
Mark?
Sorry. What has happened in the past versus what you perceive is happening in our county now. Have you seen any corrections to any of these issues?
We did see a curtailment of many of the problems we saw in 2019 and 2020. We saw that things have improved in many areas more recently.
Another question is, we have a purchasing committee that reviews the bills that the county pays. My take on this is maybe we should be reviewing on a basis the payroll or the other items that are being paid out by the county. As Julie says, we don't really have a committee to examine these things, but it would be one way of inspecting some of those transactions. you advise doing that, John?
Well, I think certainly a closer examination would have had the opportunity to find some of these things, yes. And I think given the historical situation you have, I think you're going to have to do some remedial actions for a while. And whether that's you guys doing it or having an internal audit function of the board or whomever to review things, yeah, I think you're going to have to do a few things. You've made some errors, and now you need to pay for them. And I don't mean fiscally, I mean procedurally. And part of that pay is, what are we going to do to fix this in other areas of the county, as well as assure that these things that are identified here are corrected.
What basis does our treasurer, no matter who they are, to make sure what they believe is a procedure for them to follow and how they are supposed to pay these claims versus a department head that turns in a timesheet?
I'm not qualified to answer that in terms of the legal side of that. I can say that there could be procedures from a department head side as well as the treasurer side that as they work together to assure accuracy or completeness, that's low-hanging fruit. I mean, there should be some level of oversight to assure that what's being done is appropriate.
Yeah, John, you already answered the question before I raised my hand, but if you have $1,000 that's over, $1,000 that's under, it comes down to Social Security, IMRF. There's a lot of factors that do go in there, and that, in my opinion, we need to address that, and, well, we need to fix it all, period.
Well, I want to make sure that I don't gloss over something here too. Realize that we talk about errors going one way and we talk about errors going another way. And if any other authorities get involved, it may seem unfair, but they may be only interested in errors going this way and not offsetting going this way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you have concern over the absolute value of errors. That's where I think you talk about, well, your $300,000, you underpaid $300,000 and you overpaid $300,000 and we say it's a wash. And somebody could come in and say, no, it's not a wash. That's $300,000 that we're going to find in favor of the employees that we're not finding in favor of you as the employer on these other issues. So this can be a hypocritical situation of, well, we have these things that offset and us as reasonable people could say they offset, so what's the big deal? And it's not always reasonable people that make these decisions. They're dealing with their side of the issue, not necessarily your counter argument. So I think that's something I don't want to gloss over when we talk about that $6,000 being the net. That should make you all feel a little better that it's not $600,000 the other way. But I wouldn't get a lot of peace about that because that can be a one-way street instead of two.
Mark, when you were talking about looking at the payroll sheets, I'm good with that. I think we should. But you remember, we're going through the bills and we're going through payroll. So that's going to extend that meeting length. I don't know. It could be.
It may be a random, and I'm thinking more than just a timesheet, just to verify the IMRF, Social Security, and various other things.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that might be a two-parter within that meeting. You may meet to look at the bills and then other identifiable things to check in on them. But if you lump it all together, it's going to get confusing.
Sure. Sorry.
Maybe it should be somebody else looking at it besides the people that look at the bills. So you have two separate groups so that your meetings don't run so long.
So are you talking about the board having another committee?
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, this is more important than a lot of the other committees. We need to get this right for the county. This is more important, not that the other committees aren't important. This seems to be
So you're asking for a special committee?
Fees and salaries already
Right, I'm on that.
overviews the
Yeah, I mean, it's,
payroll, so.
And we don't know what people make, and all we get we get some of their time sheets and their hours and things, and we get a payroll total. We have no clue as to what it's based on it or anything like that. All we do is look at the payroll, see if it matches up with what we get, and
but I think they're talking about doing more than just looking at payroll sheets. I think one of the things we didn't do right was, here's the contract that says like 10-hour days, you know. We need to be looking at things like that. And we can certainly look at a payroll sheet and see if for 52 weeks of the year, somebody signed in 8 to 12, 1 to 5, 8 to 12, 1 to 5. We know that's not right.
okay, that is your elected official who's running that office. They're the ones that verify these payroll sheets, turn them in. So that's where your elected official comes in.
The department head
Right,
is
the
supposed to
department head, the
verify.
elected official.
That's not an elected official. That's the department head that looks at the
Well, that's-
timesheets. Maybe they need trained on how to teach the people to fill their timesheets, you know, because apparently they're not doing it right.
If I can interject and say, I think you have a culture of not caring what this says. And I don't mean that to be offensive.
No,
But it's
I
just
agree.
simply of, I don't care what this says. I'm going to pay this person this much. I'm going to work these hours. I'm going to get paid this. And you guys need to change your culture to be, this is what it says. If we don't like what this says, we'll do an MOU.
You have to follow that contract.
You've got to follow. You have said that this is a contract. That's very simple. You have said this is our expectation as an employer. This is our expectation of you as an employee. We each know where each other's coming from. The problem is there's very, very little that is truthful between this document and what actually happened. And so that's a culture issue that you've got to fix. It's not just spot checking something. It's just simply saying, if this doesn't represent what we are doing, we need to reconcile that and either change this or change what we're doing.
We didn't go by the book.
No, I'm not sure that you need the book if it was there.
Page 7 here, Brian, I was looking, talks about accumulated comp time and vacation. John, there was quite a bit of problems in that area, I take it from our previous discussion.
Well, yeah. Well, which one are you talking about? Which section? The additional
Well,
comp?
comp time and vacation time too. We've got grievances filed, and wouldn't it be simpler if everybody turned in a time sheet listing the time, indicating comp time, vacation, sick leave? A lot of that does not go to the treasurer. She
A lot
gets
of
a
that
sheet saying pay extra.
That has been maintained at the sheriff's department, and they have a document that does a fairly decent job of that, to be honest.
Now,
Currently, during the audit period. I think there's just no oversight to that, or no coordination with the fact that your contract says no vacation or no sick time deficit, but yet you do it. It's when there's no oversight to an error that's not perceived to be a problem, then you continue to do the error.
but wouldn't that be better tracked by one person to oversee all the paychecks and have the documentation in her hand before she?
There's an
writes the
argument
checks?
that any double check would be important. I don't know. I don't care who. The fact that somebody is double checking it is important.
Mark?
Okay, something Barb just said, fees and salaries. I don't know what their responsibilities are, but from what little I heard her say, that it sounds like this is supposed to be down that avenue, to be checking some of these, following the contract, making sure that the deductions from each employee is followed. It sounds like we have it there, we just haven't done anything.
We have nothing to do with. We just get the payroll stuff.
But you could ask. You can ask for more.
And what we get's already paid.
I'm sorry?
What we get's already paid.
We get it after the fact.
After the
Well, not
Okay.
now, I think we
But
changed
that's
it.
where, doesn't that bring up the red flag if you get after the fact or not?
Well, yeah, that's how come we changed it. It's changed now, is it not, Erica?
I mean, can I speak to this? Because we're talking about a time frame that was before I was here and then after I came in. From first payroll, 2018, December 14th of 2018. Payroll was submitted to my office that was just simply pay employee Smith X amount, employee Jones X amount, with absolutely no timesheets, no documentation as to what this check covered. Immediately I started requesting. So, in your opinion, the payroll policy, if we follow that as a county, it's compliant with state, federal law. It would be compliant. It's some of the same language as in the union contracts. It took from December of 2018 until May of 2020 to actually get timesheets, documentation of hours worked recorded, and where we were, as you spoke earlier, to where we were paying for actual time worked. Now, I turn in, once those timesheets come into my office, we process payroll into the payroll system. The payroll system can track every benefit time based on the union contract, not what the department head says, based on the union contract. And then those timesheets, once we process the payroll, we send the report to the bank. Those timesheets go to Jessica's office. They are on record in her office for anybody and everybody to see. But I have begged, I have pleaded on bended knee for 3.5 years now to become compliant with state and federal law and with these contracts. I have paid according to the contracts, not what department heads have said. I will say, and I'd sent out to the full board 6 months ago, I know you and I spoke about it, John. IMRF has already contacted. They want stuff corrected back at least 3 years. So, there's a lot of work to be done. But my office can only pay based on the records turned in. There's times I've not paid because I've not gotten documentation. I will remind everyone we had a finding from Weston Company that there was a $642 check written to an employee with absolutely no documentation. None. I didn't pay it. I was called into an attorney's office with 2 attorneys demanding me I had to pay it because the department head said pay it. At some point, the only thing I have, any treasurer, I don't care prior treasurer, the treasurers in the future, the only thing they have to look at is those contracts based on what they say, any memorandums of understanding based on what those say. That's what my office statutorily has to pay.
I was just going to comment on this vacation time and all that type of thing. We have it in place now in the contract when we set the anniversary dates for like some of the vacation stuff on the date of the hire and stuff instead of, because we were always putting everything off to either January 1st or else September 1st for their, when the contracts were. So that's been changed and we hope, I think it's supposed to start like in next year. It's not?
The only thing I can say to that is there was never a memorandum of understanding, and Bobby Orman, when he was the chairman of the board, was advised to settle a grievance, but as the chairman of the board, he did not have the power or authority to change the language in that contract. That doesn't rest with one. If there's going to be a change in the language of the contract, which is going to affect the pay of employees, it has to go before the full board for a vote. That never happened. But prior to that, the board did not know. I did not know as the payroll department. I had no idea because records were not kept, time was not turned in appropriately to the payroll department to know that employees were being awarded vacation time January 1. I have to assume, when I took office December of 18, I had to assume everybody was following that contract, which said vacation time would be awarded on the anniversary date.
Did we not fix that? Was in the ASME contract, maybe we fixed that?
The new ones are fixed. The ones we just okayed this year are both fixed.
Yeah, that's what we thought.
But the old ones never got fixed
Right.
after the fact.
Right.
They were what they were. They were
I'm
not
just saying,
paid
that's something
attention
we have
to.
corrected.
But the new ones, there is a contract, as far as I know, they're being paid attention to. If they're not, I hope somebody says something. What I see, we're paying attention to the current contracts, but the after-the-fact contracts, I'm sure until there has been no effort to go back and change what was done in the past. And I'm assuming now is the time that we got to go back to the past and look at every payroll for every employee and come up with the right amounts and correct them. Is what I'm hearing from you. If that's wrong, please tell me.
Well, I don't have the authority to tell you that that's what you should or shouldn't do. I'm here to identify the errors we came up with. I think to go to your point of this is what we've changed the contracts to and this is what we hope we're complying with, I would say then spot check it. Because you had contracts to say this is what you're going to do and you weren't doing it. So if this is what the new contract says, just make sure you're doing it. I mean, that's going to be a huge improvement from where you've been.
I'm assuming the new contracts are loaded in the computer so it catches the mistake. Is that correct? Erica?
Pardon me?
The new contracts are loaded in the computer, so if there's an error, it will catch them?
No, because I still have departments that have not submitted benefit time banks, so, no, not necessarily.
Oh, you got departments that aren't submitting the right information, but the
I've still
contracts
got it
are in the
for 3 years
computer.
now, correct.
And are those departments outside of the sheriff's department?
Correct.
Okay.
And I have timesheets, as Sharon has spoken to, that are inaccurate. They do not, I have departments who are still not turning in benefit time used. I have one department in this county that has not used no employee since May of 2020 has used a personal day, sick time, or vacation time. One department from May of 2020 that has used absolutely no benefit time. So no, I cannot sit here and say that things are accurate.
No,
That's
I'm
why
saying
I've
it's in
been
the
completed
computer,
for the
so I
payroll
said.
policy to be enforced.
That's why in May, when we rolled over into the new system, I forwarded Jessica a message to send to the department heads, because I didn't have all their emails in a group, asking for all the documented bank time be turned in, and that hasn't been completed yet. But that was clear back in May of this year when we rolled over.
How many offices are there that haven't turned in their hours, turned in all that?
Is it still 4?
3 off the top of my head, and I'd have to look.
Cassie?
So, I'm just sitting here listening, and what I'm hearing over and over again from the two people in the room who know the most about what we're talking about here is that we can sit here and talk all day about what the contracts have said, what we want to write in the contracts, what we have done, what we have tried, at the end of the day, that's not the ultimate problem. We're not enforcing anything. There's not follow through. There's not accountability, and we're not currently leading as effectively as we should be. There have been changes, as you said, and you attested to that. There have been changes that have been implemented, but we need to do that. We need, as the leadership here, to be holding the departments, Erica, you can confirm that, holding the departments more accountable for following whatever the policy is that is put into place. Because really, when it boils down to it, a lot of this money that's accounted for here boils down to policy that was in place wasn't being followed. Is that accurate? Am I understanding that?
That's a pretty accurate summary.
It has to go to the elected official. The elected official turns this stuff in. They're the ones in charge of their department, and they have to be the ones that enforce it to their employees to get it turned in to us or the payroll, the fees and salaries.
Right. My question is, it's not only elected officials, it's department heads.
Well, that's what.
Elected officials, department heads.
Well, yeah, okay, all right.
Not all department heads are elected officials, are they?
No,
Some are
just the highway.
Highway's not.
Some are
Health
appointed.
isn't either.
Health isn't either. Health and highway. No, that's why I'm saying all the department heads are with the elected officials and stuff.
But, okay, now getting on to the meat of it, is if they don't do it, I guess my question is to you, and I'm not asking for an answer now, but we need to come up with some type of remedy if they don't, we've asked them, and like 3 of them haven't complied, we may have to talk about this and, see what remedy we can come up to make them come to compliance.
Well, we do hold the
interest of the whole county.
Can I ask you a question, John? Did you receive a copy of the payroll policy? In your opinion, as an auditor, I mean, I know when I presented that payroll policy to the board back prior to May of 2020, that payroll policy went to the auditors, it went to our HR specialists through our insurance, and she recommended a change in the first sentence, which it is compliant with state and federal law and our union contracts. Do you see any problem with that payroll policy as to why it could not be enforced countywide?
I'll be glad to look at that in regard to your question. I didn't come tonight prepared to answer that in that manner.
But we got Sharon back there.
What really surprises me as well, and I'm not making excuses for us, because we need to correct everything. If I was an hourly person getting paid 10 hours a day, 2 of those being overtime, that's like a 25% increase in my pay, and I get paid that I didn't notice that I was underpaid. That not one person in all this time has ever said, but I didn't get paid enough, or, I can understand him saying I didn't get paid too much.
You have overlooked the fact that 410s create a deficit of about 300 hours a year that a person didn't work that they were compensated for.
They were paid more than what they should have.
So they were paid for 80 hours every 2 payrolls.
Okay.
But it would be common for there to be only 7 days worked in that. 7 10-hour days.
Okay.
6 10-hour days. So you may be paid for 80, but only worked 60. So the issue of the overtime was probably just not thought of because it was in a different section of the contract.
Is anyone helping the payroll department at the sheriff's office understand the error? I mean, because if, I don't believe that this was done intentionally, in my personal opinion, I don't think it was intentional fraud. So I'm wondering if we don't help them learn what they did wrong to correct it, it's not going to get corrected. So have we asked, have we talked about, do they need help understanding what's going on?
I guess I'll answer that as the chairman over there, and I don't feel there's any lack of knowledge that they don't now realize exactly what the contract is and exactly what rules they're to follow. I think she said earlier that they are complying now better than other departments. And if you tell them what needs to change and what they need to do, and like we pointed out the contract 2 years ago, I mean, that's basically when all this got into effect and got started, and that's why the new contracts, I think, are being followed. If they're not being followed, I'm not aware of it, but I think they're very aware now of what they need to do. But I'm not sure what feedback they were getting before then, because I'm like Eric, none of this came up till after I was on board, and I see what's going on over there, but I'm just one person of 3 over there. I'd like the other 2 to make a comment, but I don't see anything that they're saying, I'm not gonna do that. They're looking at what they've been asked to do, and I think they're doing it.
Obstinate. I mean, do they understand so that going forward, they know to refer back to the contract, they need to understand why it's important? You know what I mean? Like,
I'm not
do they
aware that there's
need
any
help?
problem there.
Training, yeah. I mean, do they need training? Is there something
Not
we
that
as
I'm
the
aware
board
of.
can give them that can help them?
I think they're very aware of what's happened and the contract changes, and actually one of them in the payroll side is on the negotiating committee, and they know the contract that we just approved was changed and why. So I'm not aware of a need for training there, but one of the other 2 committee members has got an opinion I'd like for him to give them. That's my opinion. I don't think there is a problem there.
Personally, I feel like it's a pretty tight run ship now. We know what's going on, they know what's going on.
Okay.
It hasn't been an issue at all that I'm aware of.
Well, what I think needs to be done here now is we need to go home, we need to review this ourselves, come up with any questions, start thinking of ways that we need to get the checks and balances back in order throughout the county. We can sit here and hash back and forth and talk all night. We're not going to get anywhere tonight. To be honest, I haven't had my supper yet. I'm getting a little hungry. My stomach's growling pretty hard. Gary, I'll take yours.
The question I asked earlier, on page 2 of the document here, it says the county is over $326,000. How do we get advice? Go back to the statement earlier about our legal counsel in dealing with this matter. We need legal counsel. The county board members are held accountable for money that is incorrectly spent. And we have a duty to look at, is it collectible? Is it a wrongdoing that can be undone? I think we need legal counsel that can answer those questions. And I agree. We've also got other things we need advice on. Are we going to have to sort out people that we owe money to and correct that? Or are we going to have lawsuits coming up from employees? I think it's serious enough. We need somebody that can sit down with us at board meetings and advise us on what we need to do as a board.
That's very smart and fine state's attorney that if we need problems or got questions, she will take care of it.
Can you speak up, please?
I said we have a very fine state's attorney who's very smart. And to me, it's like you're besmirching her.
But the thing is, she has chosen to step down. She's not our legal counsel in this matter.
Maybe not on this one.
But that's what we're dealing with, is this one.
All right. We get your point, Gary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quick question. I know you've done this for a long time, so out of all this, what stands out to you the most, I guess, out of what we've seen tonight so far?
I haven't had a chance to really look into it deep enough to even come up with that answer. That's why I said I think we all need to go home. We need to read through it. We need to look through it. If you have any questions, write them down. John, Mr. Vandenberg said he'd come and answer any other questions.
I'd like to say, if some of these department heads are not following Erica's request, something needs to be done there to get them straightened out as soon as possible. Sure.
Maybe what we ought to do, like John was saying, and take everything into account, have our clean point, and have all the department heads and anybody with any affiliation of payroll and everything, have one day, if John could come in and have a workshop, a round table, whatever and get everybody together, make sure everybody's on the same page. And that would be our clean point, and then go from there.
I like it. Very good.
And I mean, get everybody together, not, I don't know if it had to be on the weekend, at night, or whatever, but.
But I don't think we can tell, like Jessica and these girls are elected, I don't think we can tell them how to run their office and what to do. I mean, I don't think as a board, we're able to do that. You might suggest something, but I don't know that we can.
No, I'm not telling them how to run their department. I'm just saying to be within the confines of the law and the recommendations that he's making. You know what I'm saying, John?
Offering help is what you're doing.
Would that sound feasible to you?
It is certainly a possibility. I'm willing to help in whatever way I can.
Appreciate that.
Post report here, we open this back up for public body comment.
Brian, I got one more question. These were given to us as a board. I know that they weren't given out to the public body yet and
There's
stuff.
very few of them.
Okay, I think it's very unfair that if people sitting out here in the public body get to look at these reports before the people who work at this place get to look at it and digest it.
It's a public record.
No, if one of my constituents wants to see this, I'm going to show it to them. I mean, I feel like that's how it should be.
Motion to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?